Hi everyone, welcome back to the Stitches and Scribbles podcast. My name is Erin, and I have had just kind of the craziest couple of weeks. As you know, if you kind of watch my channel and watch for the updates, I did not have a podcast last week because I was so busy and I hadn't had any time to work on projects, so I wouldn't have had anything to show you anyway. But just to kind of give you the gist of what the last couple weeks have looked like, I had family stay in town last week, which was more specifically the reason I didn't film a podcast, because I was busy making sure my house was clean and that the bedrooms were ready and just activities we were doing with them and all that stuff. But also, I don't know if it was the same week or the week before, I actually accepted a long-term sub position that'll start this fall. So I was kind of doing a lot of planning of how is that gonna work while maintaining YouTube and crafty things, was kind of the thought process that was happening. So I feel like I have done a lot of brainstorming and scheduling and making notes about stuff in the last couple weeks, but I didn't actually do a lot of crafting. Which is fine. I'm glad that I have a plan for when all of this happens. In case you're new to my podcast or don't know what I'm talking about, I am a substitute teacher when I'm not doing crafty things. I was a full-time teacher for 5 years. I taught middle school science, and a couple years ago decided to transition into a more flexible work environment. I also thought that I was kind of done with teaching, because my previous job ended kind of on a sour note. Not kind of, it ended on a sour note. I was not happy when I left. And I thought that I was never going to teach in a classroom again, but ended up finding this really lovely school very close to my house that I absolutely adore subbing for. So when a long-term sub position came up, I was surprised at how excited I was about it because I didn't think that that was something I'd be interested in. But I ended up accepting it and I'm really happy that I did. It just means that I'm going to have to kind of make some changes, or not changes, but do some really intentional planning around how I film videos. So once we hit fall and winter, there's a chance you'll see a lot of pre-filmed things or smaller, simpler projects, more one day makes style videos, probably fewer pattern releases. That was the other thing I had to bump. I know that I had a pattern release this past week that I was really excited for, and I originally had another one planned for end of September, but I decided to move that one to sometime next year. You will still get a pattern release this fall. It'll come out sometime in November-ish. But I decided to bump the one that I had planned for this month just to take one major thing off of my plate. The pattern preview videos are probably my most intense videos in terms of planning and how much time goes into it, and I have to write the pattern and test the pattern, hopefully get some other people to test the pattern, stuff like that. Most of the patterns that I release are pretty simple, so I don't really need a pattern tester specifically. It's usually something I can test by myself. But anyway, I decided that taking one really big thing off my plate was probably a good idea with all the stuff that's coming up soon. I will still be doing Vlogmas if that popped in your head. Vlogmas is definitely still happening. It'll just look very different because I'll be working full time. So that probably means that I'll do some small kind of after school projects. I might show more cooking videos or holiday prep that's not necessarily as time consuming. I definitely am going to scale down the projects I'm working on, or keep all the projects as like I don't need to finish this by Christmas, if that makes sense. I do have some projects planned that I am still hoping to do. Yeah. Anyway, I've been doing a lot of planning and a lot of thinking of like what my channel is going to look like while balancing these two things. But I think it's all going to be good. Everything's going to be okay. It'll be fine. And I'm really excited to be kind of jumping into, I don't want to say full-time teaching again because it's not the whole year, but like a more substantial sub position, if that makes sense. But yeah, I'm excited about that, even though I am also kind of nervous. But we're just going to roll with it. It's going to be fine. It's all going to be good. I do have some projects to show you. It is not nearly as much knitting as I would have liked to do the last 2 weeks, but I did still have fun kind of working on these projects and all sorts of stuff. The first one I'm going to show you is my Barbie socks, which this is the one sock I have completed. If you haven't watched my other podcast episodes, this is the one that I have finished. I'll kind of pull it apart so you can see it. I haven't blocked this yet, obviously. I do own sock blockers. I just haven't done that yet. This was from a Summerlee design. I forget exactly what her name is on YouTube, but Summerlee design. This was like a simple sock tutorial series that she did. It's also a free pattern. I just added a little bit of mosaic knitting around the cuff to add a pop of color. And I've been calling these my Barbie socks because of the color palette. And I originally started this thinking I was going to go see the Barbie movie with friends, and it was going to be my project to work on during that. I have now seen the Barbie movie. I went with my husband just this past weekend after all the house guests left. We went to see it and really enjoyed it. I did not work on my socks during the movie because I realized that putting in the stitch markers would be really hard in the dark, and that's how I keep track of my counts. But I did work on them a little bit. You can see my progress keeper is down here, and this is how far I got. And this was just anytime I had a spare few minutes the last 2 weeks, I did a row on my socks. If I had more time, I picked kind of a more substantial project to work on, typically. But I'm making progress on these. I'm thinking that they'll be done in a couple weeks, maybe. I still have busy weeks ahead somehow, between like markets that are happening and getting started with normal subbing for back to school. I already have a couple of sub days planned for September and October that are not the big sub position. It's just individual days. So I'll be diving back into that. So these could potentially end up being a backpack project eventually. When I say backpack project, I mean that usually when I sub like single days, I take a project with me because teacher schedules are built so that teachers have prep periods during the day, which is their time to like grade things or do lesson plans or whatever they need to get done in their classroom that can't be done with students present. But if you're a sub, you still get those prep times, but you might not have anything to do during that time unless the teacher leaves like a specific task for you. I generally try to grade things if the teacher is okay with it. I know some teachers want to look over all student work themselves, and obviously that's totally fine. But I do try to grade things, or at least like make some notes of like, here's like I generally like I try to sort things in piles and put a sticky note on top of like, this is this assignment, you have all of them except from these 3 kids and like the ones who were absent or didn't turn it in or something, just to make it a little easier for the teachers so that they're not like hunting down papers when they get back, if that makes sense. But I tend to put small knitting or crochet projects in my backpack to work on during those prep periods, just so that I have something to do in case there's nothing left for me that's task. Anyway, going back to the Barbie movie, I did bring a project to work on. during the movie, and I realized this is one that I don't think I've actually shown on the podcast, even though I've kind of been working on it for a while because it's fairly big. But I brought this plain garter stitch prayer shawl I've been working on. As you can see, it is quite big already. I have used 2 out of my 3 skeins of yarn. I just started the 3rd one. And this is, I love this yarn print, so it's from Hobby Lobby in the color Fuzzy Slippers. That's the brand of yarn that the prayer shawl group at my church uses. I think because of the sales or something. I don't know why we only use that brand, but I really like this colorway. I think it's a nice, soft, pretty pink. But I brought it for the Barbie movie because it was all garter stitch, so I knew that it would be really easy to work on in the dark. I also prefer working on light colored yarns in the dark because it's slightly easier to see. And that movie was not a very like dark movie. Like, there were a lot of bright lights throughout the film, so it was actually pretty easy to work on. Although I can do garter stitch without looking. I was also surprised at how many people were in the theater. We did go see it on a weekend, so it wasn't like I saw it in the middle of the day during a work day or anything. But it's also been out for a while, so I was surprised that the theater was so full. I don't go to movie theaters very often. I was not raised in a movie theater family, if that makes sense. We would always wait for movies to come out on DVD, and going to the movie theater was like a very rare occasion. I do remember seeing a couple movies in theater as a kid. Apparently I saw The Lion King. No, not The Lion King. What movie am I thinking of? It's not The Lion King. I saw some other like animated Disney movie when I was very little, but I don't remember it. It couldn't have been The Lion King because I was only a couple months old when The Lion King came out. I do remember going to see Lilo and Stitch in like 1st grade with a friend. My brother was really into trains when he was little, so I remember seeing the Thomas the Tank Engine movie in theaters. And then I don't think I really saw very many movies in theaters until I was in high school. I think I went to one of the midnight Harry Potter movie premieres, and I definitely went to a midnight premiere of the first Hobbit movie, but I think I was in college by then. I'm pretty sure I saw it like over Thanksgiving break. Maybe. But anyway, all of that is to say that like we didn't go to the movie theater a lot growing up, but my husband's family definitely does. That's like very much, I don't want to say part of their routine, but it's an activity that they do frequently. And I think almost every time we've gone to visit them, we've gone to see a movie in theater. But my husband and I decided this past week that like we wanted to plan an activity for after our house guests left that would be relaxing and just like a planned thing, but a planned thing where we like had to sit and just chill for a while, which we realized going to see a movie was the perfect way to do that. So we saw the Barbie movie. I don't really think there were any other movies in theaters that I would have been interested in. But I really liked the movie. I thought it was really good. Definitely like would be something I would rewatch. But I don't want to say too much about it in case people haven't seen it yet, but I would say I highly recommend it, especially if you were someone who did play with dolls, even like not Barbie dolls specifically, but just dolls as a kid. It definitely hit a lot of like nostalgia points. And it was also very funny for a lot of the movie. We also, just last night, finally saw the Dungeons and Dragons movie because they put it on Amazon Prime, so that was very fun and unexpected, but we really enjoyed that one too. Definitely funny. You don't need to have played Dungeons and Dragons to appreciate it. It's just a good fantasy story movie. I would say the only thing that like having played before would like prepare you for is all of the like types of people that are present are very much things in like D&D character building directions. And if you've played D&D, you might recognize some of the like spells or attacks that they do, but it's not necessary for enjoying the movie. Also has a really fantastic cast for such a like nerdy niche interest film. That was a lot of movie talk. Let's move on to the other project that I have been working on kind of off and on, and this is my crescent shaped shawl. It has gotten quite wide. This is my stitch marker, so everything kind of going this way is what I've worked on recently. This was also a project where I have garter sections kind of built into the design to give myself a break. So I finished the garter section and then moved on to the next lace section, and then kind of didn't do a whole lot after that because it was too complicated. I'm going to go ahead and move my stitch marker on this one for next time. Really enjoy how this is looking. I'm hoping to finish it so that I can wear it for fall weather because I think the color palette for that is really nice. And I do like working on the lace sections. It just like takes more of my brain to focus on it. But yeah, I think those are the only 3 projects that I really worked on. I'm like looking around my office to see if there's anything else that I was doing. But I think that was kind of it. Even though I didn't do a lot of knitting, I'm still like proud of the stuff that I did get done with everything else going on. I also am still doing my weekly craft fairs, but that got canceled last week too because it was so hot. So I have another one this week. I actually signed up to do a couple earlier in October, so I'll have those too. So it feels like there's a lot of moving pieces going on in my life right now that are all like things I can't do anything about right now this second. It's all like I just have to wait until they happen. Does that make sense? The planning part of my brain wants to like get everything fixed and set up now, but there's definitely parts that like I can't do anything until the day actually comes. So that's just kind of the situation at the moment. I did end up doing a lot of reading the last couple weeks, which I used to talk about what books I was reading in my podcast, like way back in the early days of my YouTube channel before I showed my face on YouTube. But I realized I haven't done that kind of since then. I don't know if anyone's curious, but I do read and knit at the same time a lot, whether I'm reading on a screen or listening to an audiobook. So I actually have read more in August than I have in any other month so far this year. In fact, I'm going to like look back at my reading history and see what kind of my favorites have been this month. I'm currently reading Fairy Tale by Stephen King, and I'm listening to the audiobook, which is 24 hours long. So that'll be fairly intense. I think I'm like 9 hours into it now and really, really enjoying it. I am not a huge Stephen King fan. I've read a couple of his books. I definitely read It, like before the movies came out. Wasn't really my favorite. I don't do clowns. I don't know why I thought that was a good idea for me to read. I think I read The Shining, maybe. I don't really remember if I read it or not, or if I just watched the movie. And I know I tried to read Dark Tower, but I think it just didn't click in my brain. I have a problem when someone recommends books and like doesn't describe them correctly, so then I'm reading the whole book looking for what that person described and not getting it. So someone had told me that Dark Tower was like, they had described it as being like Lord of the Rings. I don't know why they said that. That made no sense. Dark Tower was really more of like, if I'm remembering correctly, was like a Western in a fantasy sci-fi setting, which was not what I was expecting based off of this other person's recommendation. So I think the whole time I read that book, I felt like I was missing something. So I don't remember a lot of the plot. But I am really enjoying listening to Fairy Tale. I think the narrator does a really good job. I'm listening to it from my Libby app, so it's from the library. But I'm sure it's on Audible too if you have that. But I've definitely had a lot of like weird reads this month. Let me kind of go through and see what I've been reading. I read a couple of the Bridgerton books. I think I only have one left. I've been enjoying that series, but I'll also be glad like when I'm done with it. Just because it is a fairly long series, but I have one more book to read. I put them all on hold through my library to get the ebook copies. And I only have one left that still needs to come in. I also read the last two of the Well Met series, which is a Renaissance Fair romance series. And those were pretty good. They were entertaining. But I'm definitely ready to like get back into like more science fiction and fantasy books and thriller books, which is what I typically read. I definitely was on like a romance book kick, but I think it was just because I was reading both the Bridgerton series and the Well Met series, which combined, the two of those have 12 books. Which means that like my reading app thinks that my top category right now is romance, which is not correct. That was definitely like an outlier. I think some of the favorite ones that I've read recently are The Frugal Wizard's Handbook for Surviving Medieval England, which is by Brandon Sanderson. I also really loved Tress of the Emerald Sea, which I read earlier this year. I think I liked Tress a lot better. The Frugal Wizard's Handbook was very funny to me. It felt like reading Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, but in like a medieval England setting instead of outer space. I also have been doing a Percy Jackson reread, and I'm doing that with audiobooks, and I got the fourth one done, so I have one more left. I just took a break in order to read Fairy Tale. The other like kind of surprising one I liked recently was Gallant by V.E. Schwab, which is it was labeled as a young adult book. I would almost categorize it as middle grade because the character feels younger to me. Like I don't remember what age she specifically said, but I was picturing her as a 12-year-old. But it was a really good book. I would say the only book I read this month that I didn't like was Lord of the Flyfest by, what's her name? Goldie Moldavsky. It was just bad. And I know some of it was supposed to be ironic. It was a thriller young adult book, which I like thrillers. And I could see from the description and the title that it was meant to be a kind of sarcastic interpretation of both Lord of the Flies, which I never read, but I understand the premise, and the Fire Festival, the like failed music festival that was totally a scam. It like combined those two concepts and also made it a thriller, but it was bad. I don't recommend it. I know a lot of it was supposed to be like references to things, but the references were like too on the nose that it just felt like kind of a ripoff of either things that actually happened or celebrities that actually exist, or like just things that wouldn't happen even if like people were in this hypothetical situation. It just didn't make sense. So I'm excited to read some more books and kind of do some more like reading based things. Let me know if you like hearing about what I'm reading here on the podcast. I'd love to include it as kind of a bonus segment here and there, especially if I continue to read at the rate that I have been in August. But yeah, let me know in the comments if that's something you'd be interested in. Let me know what you're currently reading in the comments. I'd love to take recommendations. I do read pretty fast. I think I've read 12 books so far in August, which is definitely higher than any other month. I think I average around like 6. But let me know what you recommend or what you're reading or anything like that. And we're just going to end the podcast here. So thank you so much for watching. If you're interested in following me on Instagram or TikTok, that information will be in the description box below, along with a link to my Etsy store so that you can purchase patterns and digital products if you so choose. If you liked what you saw today, make sure that you are subscribed and then hit that like button and leave a comment, because that helps get my videos out to more people. Thank you again so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye, everyone.